Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Planning Committee of the 28th of March 2022. First item on the agenda is receive any apologies for absent from committee members. Howard?
Councillors Branston and Sparks.
Thank you very much. Second item on the agenda is the minutes. To approve the signed minutes of the meeting. We all agreed that they are true and accurate representation of the meeting. It's on the Howard. Thank you. I will sign their paper. Members of the committee are reminded that if you have any declarations of interest to do so under the agenda item. And we have no items that are allowed to be taken under part 2 today, which brings us on to part 5, which is the only planning application of tonight, which is the land of Pendragon Road. Who'd like to Matt Diamond?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The application for tonight is on site on land off Pendragon Road, to the north of the city, inside us within Mincing Lake and Brookton Ward. The applicant is the Land Promotion Group Limited, and the proposal is an outline planning application for residential development of up to 100 dwellings and associated infrastructure. First slide shows the location. The site outlined and hatched in red. And this second slide again shows the location with the site boundary outlined in red. It also shows the topography of the site with the contour lines, the land rising to the northwest. And this is the aerial view of the site. As you can see, the site comprises of 2 grassland fields surrounded by treed hedgerows and hedge banks with woodland to the east. This slide is the proposals map of the adopted local plan first review from 2005. The hatched green lines indicate the landscape setting area, and the areas with the green circles indicate site and nature conservation importance. This slide is taken from the evidence base for the core strategy. It is the fringes study, and it shows that the site, which is shown with a red circle around it, is in an area of high landscape sensitivity. And the next slide is an image taken from the same document, indicates that the capacity of housing within this area is low. This image is taken from the Green Infrastructure Study 2009 and shows that the site is part of the North Exeter Wooded Hills and Meadows Habitat Reservoir. And these areas are focused on habitat protection, enhancement and creation. And this next slide shows the key diagram from the adopted core strategy 2012. Showing the site to the north of the built area, again indicated in a landscape setting area with valley parks on either side. This slide is the constraints map taken from our council's GIS system. It shows Mincing Lake Plantation County Wildlife Site, which is on the upper part of Mincing Lake Valley Park to the west. Savoy Hill County Wildlife Site to the northeast. Site and nature conservation importance covers the southern edge of the site and the treed hedge bank that is adjacent to Pendragon Road. There are areas of potential contaminated land in the area from a former landfill in the upper parts of Mincing Lake Valley Park and the land to the north of it. To the west of the site is Mile Lane, which is an informal track used by pedestrians, and it is also within the Valley Park and is designated as site of nature conservation importance. Further constraints, this is the historic environment record taken from the applicant's heritage statement, showing pockets of potential heritage value within the area. Moving on to the photos. These photos were taken on the 22nd of March this year. These photos on this slide show the tree hedge bank alongside Pendragon Road, which has high amenity value and acts as an ecological wildlife corridor connecting the county wildlife sites on either side of the site. There is a bus stop already adjacent to Pendragon Road, providing options for sustainable travel. The site is used informally by local people and visitors for recreation, primarily walking, dog walking. These photos show the informal pedestrian connections from Pendragon Road, which there are 4. This slide shows further connections to the site. So the 2 photos at the top of the slide are the informal connections from Mile Lane. Bottom Lane is a footpath from the southeast corner of the site that connects to other footpaths, connects to local roads in the area. The slide on the bottom right is a footpath that connects the north-east corner of the site to Drake's Meadow to the north. This slide shows photos taken on the 11th of March, a slightly rainy day. The top left slide indicates a footpath on the site. Top right shows a dog walker. Bottom left shows the gap in the hedgerow that runs through the site. And the bottom right shows the woodland adjacent to the site to the east of the footpath next to it. This slide is taken from the top of the west field and shows the panoramic views above the surrounding trees across the city and across to the landscape beyond the city, including the estuary. And this is a panoramic view from the top of the east field, again showing long distance views across the city. Quick overview of the proposal. As mentioned, it is an outline application for up to 100 dwellings. It is, all matters are reserved except access, and access is proposed in 2 places from Pendragon Road. The applicants originally offered 35% affordable housing, however, in February they increased that offer to 50% affordable housing. And their planning statement states that there will be provision of on-site public open space and green infrastructure and/or off-site financial contribution. This image shows the illustrative layout that was submitted in support of the application. Stated it is illustrative as it is an outline application, but it indicates the 2 vehicle access points of Pendragon Road through the treed hedge bank to the south, with 2 access roads running into the site, into each field, with housing internal to each field and green buffers around the edge to protect the hedgerows and areas of public open space at the top of each field. This slide also was revised to include local areas of play, of which there are 4, in response to comments made by the public green spaces team of the council. And this image shows the detailed access drawings from Pendragon Road. There will be 2 vehicle accesses into each field across the treed hedge bank with a shared footpath stroke cycle link linking the 2 of them. And this drawing shows the proposed highway works to Pendragon Road at the eastern access point. These next 2 slides are taken from the Chartered Landscape Architects report that was undertaken on behalf of the council, reviewing the applicant's landscape and visual appraisal as well as the site. So this photo is taken from Ludwell Valley Park, showing the green hills to the north of Exeter. And if we zoom in, there's an arrow indicating where this site is, showing that it is a fundamental part of those green fields and is visible in those long distance views. And this next slide again shows the long distance views towards the site and those green hills from another place in Ludwell Valley. And we can zoom again and again. The yellow coloured field is the site in question. And this again is taken from the landscape architect's report. There's a photo taken from Savoy Hill Valley Park to the east, showing clear views of the rural undulating landscape with the site just beyond the trees you can see. This final slide was taken a couple of weeks ago. These images are taken from Mile Lane and just shows that you can see the site through the vegetation this time of year in a number of places at the southern end of the site. As you go further north, Mile Lane becomes much more enclosed with steeper hedge banks either side. So the recommendation is refusal. Just a final matter before we open up to debate. You'll see from the additional information sheet, and we'll note from the report that we didn't have a final response from the local highway authority in terms of the revised access proposals. The information we received as of Friday was the highway authority still had some problems with the proposed access. However, since this email was received, I have discussed the access issues with the head of highways at Devon County Council, Brian Hensley, who's here this evening, who has told me that in his view the access issues can be resolved by planning commission and are resolvable, so that there is no need to add a further reason for refusal. Also on the update sheet, we were also waiting for a further response from Devon County Council's legal local flood authority to the revised access plans, but we have not had a further response from them. And in my view, I think that issue can also be dealt with by planning condition. However, there are 5 reasons for refusal recommended as per the case report. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any questions for Mark or the report? I thought we were going to go through this one. Thank you. I have a question about transport. Do you want me to ask?
Go ahead. We've got expertise on that.
Okay, thank you. We're just trying to find that. Can we have a look at that side with the access, please? Thank you. The next one, please. I just wanted to ask the county council, if that's okay with yourself, about the transport bill, because I'm just rather concerned that there isn't their view on whether cycling is safe on that road or not, particularly around that bend, because I can't see how it could be. Particularly for children going to school down Bottom Hill.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing to say, I guess, is that with the bend there, it's a very low speed environment. But before we agreed any final changes to the junction, it would have to go through a road safety audit, which would ensure that considered the needs of all vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cyclists. So I'm confident that in that sort of environment it can be made suitable access can be provided. for all users.
Is there any follow-up on that? You're okay. Okay, next we're going to have councillors speaking of the standing order. Councillor Aycock. You know the drill, we've been here before, you can speak for as long as you like, but don't really live up to that.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Firstly, thanks to Matthew Diamond for all his work on this application. This has been more than a year in the making, so I'm really glad we have the opportunity to finally discuss it tonight. And I'm delighted and relieved that it comes to you with a recommendation for refusal, which I heartily echo. This development has caused huge concern among residents of BPP and the wider city. On Saturday, I attended a gathering at Mincing Lake Park where over 100 residents came out to express their love for our city's ridgeline. This application has also received over 220 written objections, and a tireless group of residents have been meeting every Sunday night for over a year to discuss their concerns. These people can't be here tonight, but I hope to reflect their voices through my remarks. Before I outline the myriad ways in which this application falls short of our planning policies, I want to touch on the affordable housing provision, which was increased last month from 35 to 50%. We all know that social housing waiting lists are growing, that rents are rising at their fastest rate on record, and many people are struggling to find and afford adequate housing. It is therefore deeply regrettable to be speaking against an application that promises to add to our affordable housing stock. However, while we do need this housing, I don't believe it should be delivered at any cost. The compromises that this application would require us to make on biodiversity, on public open space, on our environment, would create deep and irrecoverable harm to our city. And no number of affordable homes will change the fact that this is simply an inappropriate and unsustainable place to build. I would therefore urge members to look beyond this and consider the deep flaws in this application, which I will briefly outline now. Firstly, on harm to landscape character. This application is one in a series that has come forth in recent years to develop the distinctive rural northern hills of our city. The most recent of these, on land adjacent to Celia Crescent, was refused unanimously by you when it came to the committee last year, and I'm very grateful to all members for their ongoing commitment to steer development away from our ridgeline, which is subject to protection from harm in several policy documents, including in paragraph 4 of our core strategy. The two fields concerned in this application, the bus stop fields as they are known locally, are situated on especially sensitive land in this ridgeline and occupy an elevated position with long distance views to the ex-estuary and out to the Tor Bay coast. They have strong rural character and are sandwiched between two valley parks, Mincing Lake to the west and Savoy Hill to the east, as well as adjoining the ancient rural greenway of Mile Lane, which alongside Mincing Lake Park is a site of major conservation importance. As we've heard, the site lies within landscape existing land and is classified as Zone 3 within the fringe of study, meaning that it has no capacity for housing because of its prominence, rural character and intrinsic sensitivity. The character and distinctiveness of this site is therefore protected from harm under policy CP16, which was confirmed as carrying full weight by the Pennsylvania appeal decision of January 22. And there is no question that this development would conflict with CP16. To quote from the Chartered Landscape Architect instructed by the Council to review these proposals, the development would not be an organic extension to the urban area, but an incongruous, piecemeal development into the rural hinterland. As you've seen, it would protrude beyond the natural urban edge, it would disrupt hitherto expansive countryside views from Mile Lane and the site's neighbouring country parks, and it will effectively destroy part of the city's rural backdrop. The landscape architect was therefore unequivocal in their conclusion, which is shared by planning officers, that this would be a highly detrimental development and therefore conflict with CP16. And it was heartening to see the dismissal of the Pennsylvania Road appeal on landscape existing grounds back in January. As Matthew Diamond points out, there are many parallels to be drawn between these sites. Therefore, the appeal decision is a material consideration, and all the more so because this site is arguably more sensitive and because we are talking about up to 100 houses. Secondly, on loss of public open space, it is pertinent to note, as outlined in the committee report, that private land can also be recognised as publicly accessible space in planning terms. Such is the case for this site, which has been freely used by residents for recreation for generations. As part of their representation, the Exeter Green Spaces Group collected a series of testimonies from residents about the role that these fields have played in their lives. We hear from people who recall playing in these fields as children and who now take their own children there, from those who picked blackberries and apples and had picnics and walks with neighbours. Some residents described walking in these fields for over 60 years, and not one of the respondents ever recalled seeing a fence around land in all of this time. That was until January 2021, when the planning application was submitted. We also hear how these fields are an important sanctuary for residents, providing space from claustrophobic flats and helping with physical and mental health. Losing these fields to recreation would be devastating to the local community. And yet, surprisingly, the application does not even acknowledge this decades-long history of public use. Nor does it address policy L3, which stipulates that the loss of public open space must be compensated for by open space of at least equivalent value. And from looking at the plans, it is clear that the additional open space that would be created is not of equal value, it is smaller than the area that would be lost in the development, and it would have less value for residents once its rural nature has been destroyed. And just to add that while the site does adjoin Mincing Lake Valley Park, we can't rest on our laurels with public open space. With a growing population, our green spaces are under growing strain, and any form of piecemeal development on their borders chips away at their ecological value and sets a dangerous precedent. If anything, we need to be doing more to build up our public open space, and I'm glad to see that green space has been given such significance in our new local planning consultations. Next, on harm to biodiversity. This site is a biodiversity haven and an important wildlife corridor for the neighbouring valley parks. It features in the Green Infrastructure Study, and the southern hedge bank is part of an SNCI. Protected species surveys found at least 11 bat species using the site for foraging and commuting. There's been evidence of badgers, and populations of slowworms and lizards have been recorded. Residents' testimonies also reveal seeing glowworms, foxes, deer, rabbits, field mice, butterflies and birds, including owls and jays. The fields are also home to a broad array of established trees up to 17 metres tall, including mature and early mature oaks, as well as field maples and ash. And I echo the officer's conclusion that, far from creating the biodiversity net gain that the applicant's ecological impact assessment would suggest, this development would cause significant harm. Firstly, many of the trees described above would need to be removed to create access from Pendragon Road and from the west. And while it is judged on paper that this loss could be compensated for by a new planting scheme, in practice, the removal of these established trees will have a devastating impact on the biodiversity of this site. And as the Devon Wildlife Trust points out, the extent of habitat loss due to this has not even been included in the EIA. Secondly, the removal of trees from the southern hedge bank would weaken the applicant's proposed mitigation of creating dark buffer areas to maintain connectivity to bats. Two of the trees identified for this are close to the southern access, which will now be disturbed by visible street lights and increasing passing car headlights, which will undoubtedly have a negative impact on the field's resident bats and all other wildlife. Finally, residents informed me that they saw the fields being stripped prior to the surveys being carried out. Add to this the fact that some surveys are missing, and it is clear that we cannot establish a solid baseline for the current biodiversity value of the site, let alone capture its full potential as a wildlife haven. On biodiversity then, this application once again fails. It would create harm on a site that significantly includes an SNCI and would conflict with policy CP16 and LS4. And as the planning officer rightly states, the development is not needed in this location and does not outweigh the nature conservation benefits of the site. Finally, on environmental harm and social unsustainability, it is now a matter of fact that the high hills in this part of the city, coupled with the scarcity of local amenities and unreliable public transport, mean that any housing development in this area will necessarily be car-led. You only have to look at the applicant's transport statement to see this. With 2 parking spaces being provided per house, clearly conflicting with local plan policy T10, which imposed a maximum of 1.5 spaces per dwelling. The Highways Authority also commented that the transport statement underestimated the number of additional peak hour movements that would be generated by this development. And Devon Highways rightly pointed out in their March 21 objection that given the climate emergencies declared by both ECC and DCC, that any applicant should promote sustainable transport modes. And yet there is a woeful provision in this application to support safe active travel. Exeter cycling campaign highlights that the cycling infrastructure referenced in the transport statement is 700 metres away from the site from Beacon Lane, requiring a journey down the narrow roads of King Arthur's or Lancelot. In addition, while there may be a bus stop near the site, as we have discussed before, we cannot rely on a private company to make this application sustainable, and certainly not at a time when routes are being cut and services routinely delayed. The reality is, therefore, that this development will create more congestion and emissions at a time when we urgently need to reduce them, will undermine our net zero goals, and would stand squarely against core strategy objectives 1 and 5 that seek to limit the use of fossil fuels, encourage walking and cycling, and reduce car dependency. This is not even to mention social sustainability. We know that local infrastructure is already at its limit and is struggling to accommodate a high volume of already approved developments. The local secondary school is full, and while Section 106 contributions would support development of a new site to the south of the city, there is no guarantee that this would trickle down and create local places. GP surgeries in the area wrote to councillors last year expressing their concern that they will not be able to sustain their high quality care without significant infrastructure investment, and the RD currently does not even receive financial contributions from local developments. So to sum up, yes, we need to build houses, but we also have a responsibility towards current and future residents that we build well-connected, healthy and sustainable communities too. One of Exeter City Council's 3 strategic priorities is to build great neighbourhoods with vibrant and dynamic local centres, an imperative that is also reflected in our core strategy vision. This development would not achieve this. It would put further strain on overstretched communities, would harm net zero goals, would undermine our plans for increasing well-being and active travel, and would fly in the face of our long-standing commitment to steer development away from our rural ridgeline. It would be a disservice to current and future Exeter residents. What will achieve this is our Liverpool Exeter programme, and I am so pleased to see the council getting closer and closer to delivering the housing that we do so desperately need without compromising on environmental and social sustainability. With brownfield sites clearly identified through Liverpool Exeter, approving greenfield development now would clearly be contrary to the sequential approach we have committed to under policy H1, which was also confirmed as being up to date by the Pennsylvania appeal decision. Exeter exceeded the housing delivery test by 155% last year, and we have a healthy housing supply of at least 4.8 years in counting, and it is pertinent to note that the Pennsylvania appeal was dismissed despite not having a full 5 years. So in this case, as with that one, the threat that this development poses to landscape, biodiversity, open space, and our environment clearly and significantly outweigh its limited benefits. And I acknowledge that it is painful in refusing an application that would provide for affordable housing, but let's keep our focus and deliver that affordable housing on previously developed land where residents are connected to the city and communities and not isolated on top of a hill without means of transport or sense of community. I therefore echo the planning officer's recommendation and ask that you refuse this development tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alcock. Does anyone have any questions at all? Thank you for the presentation. Can I just ask you the same question I asked County Council about the cycling routes at the entrance points and getting down to the cycle route, which would be down the hill, and also, for example, how I'm also concerned about how children get to school at the bottom of the hill. From your experience of the local council, would you think that those plans can be modified, or those are appropriate for safe cycling from school or work or whatever?
Well, I'm not by any ways, in any means, an expert on highways, and that looks like quite extensive changes to the structure of the road, but I would say currently, I wouldn't feel safe cycling around that bend. There's nothing that enforces the 20-mile limit. There's people speeding a lot in that area. There's a lot of cars parked on both sides, so visibility is very low. I read something in the application, and I'm not fully up to speed on how, but they propose moving one of the chicanes, how you pronounce it, in the middle of the road. So that was a concern that I had, that actually that's going to make speeding potentially worse. So I think I'm not convinced that that would be a safe cycling infrastructure route.
Any further questions? No? Thank you, Councillor Alcott. Now we have a member of the public speaking. It's the Exeter, that's Dr. Claire Morgan. I'm afraid you only get 3 minutes, and I'll give you a shout when your time's up. Thank you. Good evening. So I'm representing the views of the Beacon Heath community to voice their concerns about this application. These echo points of refusal identified by name and land use, such as the loss of green space, the detrimental effect on the artificial landscape of the city, biodiversity of valley parks, the exacerbation of existing pressures on local services and amenities, and the inevitable car-centric nature of this development. I grew up in Wixon, and I have many friends who live on the streets surrounding this area, and I well remember the bus stop fields being used as an open space. The community of Beacon Heath have been using the fields for generations as a space for recreation and well-being. Bus stop fields also provide a valuable wildlife corridor between the Mincing Lake and Savoy Hill Valley parks. The owners claim subsidies under the CAP for maintaining this land to support public access, and for many years nature and community survived there. Residents report that no access restrictions were in place until this application was filed, at which point gates and fencing were erected and vegetation stripped and cut back hard, just ahead of new growth and breeding seasons. With Exeter growing year on year, green space is more valuable than ever, and with Exeter currently not meeting natural England standards on green space ahead, the residents urge the City Council not to allow development of such an important wildlife corridor and space for well-being. The position of the site within the green skyline of Exeter also represents 2 points of objection for local residents. Firstly, that building on this site will destroy the green skyline of the city, a boundary recognised by the ECC since the 1950s and which is visible for many miles. Secondly, the transport difficulty such an elevated site represents. The application suggests the site will be suitable for green travel, but being at the top of such a considerable hill, it makes walking and cycling difficult. The amenities named by the developers as being within walking distance, such as shops and medical centres, will not be easily accessible for anyone with small children or limited mobility. It should also be noted that some of those amenities, such as the pharmacy, are no longer operational. Additional traffic on the regularly busy congested roads will also exacerbate existing problems. As noted by name, the public transport links are also not as good as stated, particularly the city bus service, which has been cut back in recent years and is currently very unreliable. Residents are also aware that schools and GP surgeries are currently at capacity and are concerned about the detrimental effect that further housing will have. The development represents a huge disservice for people of Beacon Heath and takes Exeter further away from its targets in improving health, reducing pollution and meeting net zero 2030. Building a car-centric development in such an area of important landscape and green infrastructure value is not what Exeter or the people of Beacon Heath need. Exeter City Council has a history of building excellently designed housing estates embedded good amenities and green space into their design, alongside access to the countryside. While the offer of additional social and affordable housing is welcome, this application is not up to standards with ECC sought to meet in public housing, nor is there a guarantee that the offered amount of housing will be built. The people of Beacon Heath urge the City Council to remain true to their heritage and to continue to provide housing which meets the aim of the livable Exeter by refusing this application. Thank you.
Excellent timing, let's do that. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you very much for your time. Right, we did have an objector to speak who is not able to attend, so they've asked that I read out a statement from them, which I'm going to do if it does not. Hello.
Sorry, Chair, you said objector or supporter?
Supporter, I think you meant, thank you. Which I'm going to do, I do it in all neutrality as the chair of this committee. I wish to speak in support of this application. Oh, sorry, from Catherine Newby, who owns this joint owning land. I wish to speak in support of this application for up to 100 homes, 50 affordable homes. I have read the planning committee report and the planning office recommendations, and I disagree with some of the findings. I reiterate the fact that this land is and always has been privately owned and been in the same family since the 1950s, and has been actively farmed with stock grazing on both fields. At that time, the only entrance through Mile Lane, one from Farm Gateway. It was not until the homes were built on the estate and Dragon Road and Arthur's Road that the antisocial behaviour began. Youths breaking into the field, drug taking, riding motorbikes, etc. around the fields, generally causing nuisance and damage, and it is on public record that the police were called on many occasions regarding this. Harvesting carried out was disrupted by fire overnight, which was classed as criminal damage by the police. After gates and new fencing were carried out on several occasions, at great expense, they were broken down time again. The police attitude that if it was repaired, it would be damaged to gain entry and continued antisocial behaviour. The land has been impossible to farm since. The local public have Midsonlake Park, which is a vast and well-managed area. Why do they consider that lots of about 17.75 acres of land should belong to them too? The local residents should bear in mind the homes they live in were built back in the 50s. The land is poor quality agricultural land, more sustainable indeed if built in new homes, especially affordable homes rather than building homes of good quality agricultural land as is happening around the city of Exeter. The council insists on no homes and even affordable homes are desperately needed being developed on this land. I'd like to hear from what they consider the way forward to be solar panels or wind turbines perhaps. So that's some brilliant as well. There we go. After that, I can't answer any of your questions. Hello, maybe I can.
I'm aware that you're reading out the statement, Chair, but just make sure that we capture it correctly. Am I right in hearing that in part of that statement the supporter is bewailing the fact that they don't farm the area anymore because of the antisocial behaviour, and then later on they actually say that it's poor quality land that isn't viable to be used for agricultural purposes? I'm confused.
I would say they say both, yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions for me on this bit of paper? That's all I can answer. Okay, in that case, I'd like to open this item to debate. That's that happened.
Chair, I just want to make a general comment about this application for specifics. Isn't it marvellous what you can do when you try? For years and years and years, we've had endless developers and landowners coming to this council, lobbying hard to say, oh, we can't do 10%, we can't do 30% affordable and social housing. And now the cat's over the bag, isn't it? We've got apparently a development here that is commercially viable with 50% of affordable housing. I'm not for the moment saying that we should necessarily renegotiate our affordable allocations, but it does make me think, and I'm sure it'll make a lot of people think around the city, what is actually a viable development? People can still make good money out of the development and provide 50% affordable housing. Now, I share, as you can imagine, Councillor Alcott's regrets that we cannot support this because we all know we've got a housing emergency in Exeter and Devon. But nevertheless, we cannot support this for all the reasons that she and the other speaker and the officers have outlined. If we agree this will just simply set culture forces through all of our policies, all of our green spaces, and it's just completely unacceptable. And I think that's clear. I did want to talk about page 26, in particular the submission from the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Authority, of whom I am a member, and it outlines in there quite clearly that it does not satisfy the criteria required for B5 access. So I think on those grounds alone, there's going to be serious concern about granting this application. And I've been around some time, and I remember when the new houses were built in Clover Avenue and Lavender Road and Kinnison Way, and we thought that everything was fine, and then one of the coach houses, not long after they were built, somebody decided it was a good idea to set a car on fire. And I remember very well the fire engines turned up and there was nowhere to use gas as a hydrant because the developers haven't put any in. So again, in that alone, it says that how well thought out and how did it get to the committee stage? Well, they hadn't checked with the fire authority that they were meeting the access to prevent a serious incident. I'm also concerned as well, as I'm sure other members are, about this car-led development again. And we all know that the huge problem we've got with buses at the moment, I use the word bus service advisedly, of course, because I wouldn't really describe it as a service at the moment. But also the other elements around the open space and the play provision. Again, we're building these developments, and quite large developments. There's no proper play provision in that. We're expecting children and families to go across main roads and go somewhere else. I don't deny the Pendragon Road play area would benefit from some money, I'm sure, but how sustainable is that, across the main road? So I think, in a way, the committee is bound, for all of the reasons given today, to refuse this, and I'm happy to move refusal.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. As well as the bigger issues that this raises in terms of strategic planning policy, I do agree with Councillor Hanford about some of this is a very poor application. I noticed the issue about the fire service, I think you're making that point. I am very concerned about the fact that it's identified seems to be a discrepancy about the number of transport, the number of car trips, and the transport assessment seems to be not accurate, and vision of 2 car parking spaces per house. So I'm really worried about that, and also about the quality of the air pollution. It's likely to be negligible, but actually we need to consider the National Policy Planning Framework, which identifies the overall additional contribution, and we have an air quality management area, so we need to look at the combined impact of that. I'm also wanting to look at the ecological impact. The tree officer says the removal of trees is regrettable, but it's listed actually as an objection. It isn't an approval, and there is very little consideration to what any improvements to biodiversity might be. We've had a significant impact on biodiversity if this development goes ahead. So whether this is affordable housing or not, actually what we'd be approving if we supported this would be a very poor quality development for people who might live there. And just on the playgrounds, they're all sited around the edge, and the focus of this development is actually the roads, and I think that's all topsy-turvy. And if you've got small children, particularly, you'd be worried about sending them to the edge of somewhere. So I think this is just not acceptable. Thank you.
I feel like I should defend the officers. I would say first we have an extra list now, which means that the information that we ask for before we register an application tends to be a bit more thorough because we against that. Matt's done great work on that. But also, I don't think we can fault the officers with the work they've done to try and get the information here. It doesn't, I just want to make it clear that it doesn't set the simple council problems on this application. And they've been very excellent working on this for quite some time, so I just feel like I should defend them a little bit. I just want to have that clarity because I just felt like I should defend them a little. Councillor Ellick.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly haven't got a closed mind to this, but I've listened carefully to Councillor Alcock's presentation, 5 reasons that the officers have given, and to be perfectly honest, it could have been 100% social housing, and I would still not be minded to approve this. It's not about who lives in it, it's about what it's going to impact it's going to have onto the community, and also people potentially who will end up living there. I don't think it's right. I think the report is clear, presentation, a lot there to think about, a lot of research has been done by the councillor, and also the people in the area who's meeting every Sunday night. I can understand that. And so, as Chair, I will be voting for the recommendation, which is in effect against the application. Thank you.
Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair. I'm a ward councillor for this area, and I'm also the councillor for supporting people, and this covers the area of homelessness. I'm acutely aware of the numbers of people that we have on our waiting list for housing, and as has already been expressed,
it is very, very difficult when you have these two conflicting challenges. But I have to say that, as has already been expressed by Councillor Wilcock, although this pains me, I will be voting with the recommendation to reject this particular application for all the reasons that have already been stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Just indulge Chair for a bit. I am the third councillor for this area. I don't think there's much I can say that Councillor Armcock hasn't brought to this. I've obviously read and listened to the objectives proposal, reaction to it. I think I'm really cynical of the 50% affordable housing, and I can't decide if I'm cynical because they're trying to bribe us into, that's a cool word, they're trying to coerce us, make it sound like a better deal, don't be right. Or whether it's more to do with the fact that they're concerned they won't be able to sell the houses in the particular place they're in, it's one of the slightly less desirable areas of the city. I have to point out, I live there, I think it's great. So I just want to make that really clear, but house prices are not as expensive in BK as they are outside the city. So I'm very cynical about that, and I also have this feeling they come back again and again if it works for the development to see that reduced over time. I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed with the highways report. It's not the most thorough of guys, and I have concerns that as a local council, one of the greatest emails we get from people on that state is the irresponsible driving, the speeding, the poor behaviours there. And I would have to say, when Name was asked earlier about that was a safe place to cycle, first of all, I got up that hill, it would be a miracle, but I wouldn't feel particularly safe on that area. And I think actually it's like other applications we've seen in the hills, just the topography of the area makes it very unsustainable. And I don't know how we fix that, and I think we should find a way of doing that because it leads to isolation in that community. But I can't fix bus services until we have a government sort of big sea change. I don't think we're going to experience. So I have to agree that I'm working really hard to keep on to those hills I grew up in and around. I still live there, not close enough to this application for it to be an issue, but we're working really hard on this, and we are starting to get somewhere. We are starting to win our reviews of appeals, and I think that it would be really foolish to go back on that precedent, because I think as a committee and as a planning team, we work really hard to achieve this. So I have to agree and say that I will be voting against this application and full refusal. So I've had Councillor Hammond, you coming back just to move the recommendation again?
Very quickly, could I suggest for the benefit of the minutes, but to clarify matters, that we don't use the words that you used, and we use the word encourage us to support me,
yes.
rather than the other two words that you used, because I think that might be a problem. One thing I did forget to say, Chair, it was on my list, I just forgot to say it, is my concern looking at that map and the way that it's laid out, and the hedgerows going down the middle. Another concern I had with this 50% housing was it going to be a development of us and them, private on one side and social affordable housing on the other? Because we have seen that before, and I should have asked that for clarification, but that was another thing that was weighing on my mind in the refusal.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you're very right about the words I used. They weren't quite correct, and they weren't what I meant, and I knew that when I was saying it, so I'm very sorry for getting mad about that. In which case, I'm someone recommending refusal. Do I have a seconder? Everybody, take your pick. And can I ask all those in favour of the recommendation? Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That one's been refused. And the next item on the agenda is item 6, decisions made without withdrawal applications. Withdraw applications. Barry?
Nothing to add to the report, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Then item 7, the appeals report. Do I have any questions? No? Okay. And the final item is the site inspection party, which is Tuesday the 12th of April, and that's Councillor Moore's, Councillor Sparrow, and Councillor Sutton.
Apologies, Chair. Just to bring to members' attention, in section 4.1, in close to the present decision that this committee made some months ago, there is an appeal in now, so officers are working on providing a robust defence of the committee's decision.
And I understand that's going to be held as a proper inquiry, is that right?
It is indeed required.
Thanks very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And anybody else? I'll get the meeting to close.